that's when he said, I'll have more for you tonight. You know, I just wanted to meet you first, and I want to help you more, but it was some excuse, like he forgot something, or he had to drive somewhere else, but he would have more that night, and I could just come by and pick him up, or he could drop him off or something later that night. You know, when you're altered, in withdrawal, and all you can think about is getting yourself out of that pain, you know, or just getting by the next hour or the next day, you can make some really stupid decisions. And when you're dealing with manic depressive disorder, or a type of bipolar or schizophrenia or anything like that, which I didn't know I had the manic depressive at that time. When you're in manic, when you're in different states, you make very, very dangerous, risky decisions that you wouldn't otherwise. Because I'm no idiot. Like, I grew up in a very dysfunctional home, but I was not raised a dummy. And so I never did stupid things. I never did risky, dangerous things in that sense. Unless I was in a manic state, or under, you know, demonic possession and things like that. But I would notice later on it just got worse and worse with the risky behavior. Like, God only knows what could have happened to me. And I know, looking back, what could have happened to me. But anyways, as he had said, oh, just come by my hotel room. Actually, I don't have time to really hang out or anything, but you can run by and come and just grab the pills, and then maybe we can hang out another time. So again, I didn't really perceive any threat. I didn't think that anything was going to happen. I'd met him earlier that morning. It wasn't a big deal, and I was desperate because I was already back in withdrawal, and my symptoms were hitting pretty bad. And so I got over there. I went up to his floor, and I remember as I was going up, I thought to myself, this is so dangerous. Like, why am I doing this? But know why you're doing it. And again, it just overrides. The need for relief just overrides everything. And so I had this way also of kind of dissociating in general, like survive, right? My whole life has been survive. So just get by, freeze and get by. Just like when I was bullied at the private Catholic school I went to by the teachers and other students, or when the kid 3 grades ahead of me in my sister's class, a boy 3 years ahead of me who was huge, it was like as big as an adult to me at the time, I was only in kindergarten, would stand in the line when we were waiting for the bus and kick me in the shins over and over and over again, and it was so painful. But I wouldn't move and I wouldn't look at him. I pretended like it wasn't happening, right? I froze. I would just stand there. And sometimes, like, tears would stream down my face, but I would never say anything or acknowledge him, acknowledge that he was kicking me. You know, the principal who was always standing right there never did anything. Nobody cared. And so my whole life, that's what I was used to. I was used to getting through the moment to get past it. And if that means freezing up, and if that means dissociating, if that means pretending like something's not happening, that's what I would do. And so I got upstairs. It was one of like the really high floors. This was one of the nice, I think it was a Hilton at Broadway at the beach. And I think he was somewhere like 9th or 10th floor, 11th maybe. And I went up there, walked into his hotel room, and before I knew it, I found myself in the corner of his hotel room. Like, the bed was to my left, and then there was like a couch over to the right. And he started talking and kind of chatting up, and I was just kind of like, okay, well, I know you got to get going, you know, let me get, you know. And so I was waiting for him to give me the rest of the pills. And then that's when he started saying, well, yeah, I gotta go, but I need you to help me out with something because I'm really, you know, I really need this, or I really need that. And then that's when I don't really want to get into too much detail about the actual stuff, but you guys get the gist of it, alright? So I ended up turning a trick in that hotel room for the first time in my life, because I knew I wasn't going to leave that hotel room without something worse happening if I didn't do it. I knew, and it was made clear to me by him, that if I didn't do the one little trick that he asked me to do, that he was going to rape me or worse. And so at that point, the door was quite far away. I was in the hotel, backed into a corner, and he was all smiley and acting like nothing's wrong, basically in between me and the door, which was all the way over there. I could have not in any way, shape, or form overpowered this guy. He was clearly large, worked out type of guy. Bigger than me in like every way. And I can't really explain exactly what happened, but I dissociated. I did what I had to do to get out of there with the least damage possible. And it was the first time I'd ever done that in my life. And I did not, of course, want to be raped again. And I did not want something worse to happen. But those things weren't even going through my mind at the time. I wasn't sitting there calculating what different things could happen and weighing the options. It's like you're frozen the moment you're cornered. This guy is going to get something from you. And it's best you just comply and get as little done with as you can and get out as fast as you can and just never go back and never let it happen again. And so I did what I did. He gave me the pills, which there was no way I was leaving without after that. I could not even, I couldn't even think about what I'd just done. I couldn't even think about what just happened. I was so disgusted. I was so terrified. I hated myself. I just wanted to disappear. And, again, I'm just in this survive, grabbed the pills, went downstairs, got in a car, which I had taken an Uber over there, and, went back home. And I remember, first thing I did was throw up. And then I basically spent, after I crushed up the whole handful of those pills and took them, to try and forget what happened as soon as possible. And that the withdrawal, it wasn't even so much a withdrawal at that point, because I was in like adrenaline rush shock kind of, but as soon as possible numbing what just happened. And then I just remember basically just showering over and over and over again, and you know, just going through this whole routine, hygiene, cleaning, and I couldn't do, you know, it was just hours that night. I could not, I was so nauseous, I was just so disgusted. And eventually the pills and the alcohol mix, which I was drinking at that time with the pills, not drinking a lot, but I was drinking at that point. I'd have a beer or whatever with them. I fell asleep, woke up the next morning in withdrawal, but not just in withdrawal, but with the effect of and the memory of what had happened the night before. And that marks the night that caused the entire spiral to just unfold, snowball, whatever analogy you want to use for it. I could not live with myself. I could not live with already what had happened to me in life and what I had done in my life and what I had experienced in my life and where I was. I couldn't handle it. By the time, like I said, I got back from Oklahoma and then in Virginia and then left, I already had no respect for myself. I already did not love myself, care about myself. I already didn't want to be alive. But I most certainly and above all hated myself. That's all I ever was taught to do anyway. So, despite that, I was desperate to numb that. I was desperate to forget what happened. I couldn't face it. And so the more I went into withdrawal and the more clarity hit me and the more my senses hit me and the more I started to come out of it, the more desperately I needed more pills. And to get more pills, guess what I had to do? So yeah, I reached a point where I couldn't just get pills. I couldn't just sell something. I couldn't just figure out money. And once that happened, that one scenario, it just opened the door in the sense that it more like busted it down and broke it down. Now there was this cycle in which I had to stay numb. I couldn't come back up from that. I had to stay out of withdrawal. And now I've already done this. And I officially hate myself even more than I did before, which I didn't think was possible. And so what do? That one thing that is making you hate yourself and want to die and making you sick and throw up, you do again to get the pills to forget about it, to be numb, to breathe, to have relief. And that's what marked the beginning of it, and that's how I got into it. And I spent 2 years with a period of time where I was in a methadone clinic. So basically the pills only lasted as far as looking for them on the street, getting them on the street, turning tricks for them, because they're so expensive. That's why people end up going to heroin, because you can't afford, nobody can afford a pill habit off the street. I don't know anybody that can anyway. Even prostituting and stuff, it's too much. There's $1 a milligram, going through 150, 200, 300 milligrams a day. You know, you just can't afford that, and they're harder and harder to get on the street. And in Myrtle Beach, heroin was the easiest thing to get on the street besides crack cocaine. And so my heroin dealer, who was consistent throughout the 2 years that I was there, who had gotten me the Percocets originally, started selling me heroin. I remember when I had first done heroin, it really wasn't a big deal to me. I still preferred the oxys. I still preferred painkillers. I didn't really get what the big deal was. But there is a point between uses, a certain amount of uses, where that changes. And I noticed that after 2 weeks, I didn't want the pills anymore. Because I was basically waiting on him to get more pills. Because I told myself I'd never get into heroin. I'd never get into street drugs. Ever, ever, ever. I'm too paranoid anyways about stuff like that. And I know what's in a pill. I can look up the milligram and the marking and all that. You don't know what's in heroin. And so I wasn't going to go down that path because I was desperate. I got the heroin off him because he said he was going to get pills later. Well, by the time that happened, I just wanted the heroin, and of course it was way cheaper. I didn't have to turn as many tricks. I didn't have to find as many men a week to support my habit, to stay out of withdrawal. And then, of course, staying out of withdrawal wasn't enough after that. I needed also to be high. I didn't just need to be numb. I needed to feel like I actually loved myself or cared or that there was any hope, and I had none of that. I was completely dead inside. I was completely dead inside. And things just escalated. You know, there were things that I told myself I'd never do, just like before then. In my whole life, there's things you never do. You would never imagine yourself doing, you would never do. You would never lower yourself to that point. But let me tell you, when it comes to drug addiction, I mean, demonic possession even aside, when it comes to drug addiction, when it comes to that type of trauma and aftermath and PTSD and mental illness, you end up doing things that you think you would die before doing. And you die more every time. More of you dies every time it happens. It would take something from me. I was never capable, after that first night of what happened that I just went into explaining, I was not capable of turning a trick. I was not capable of meeting someone or having someone over without having several shots of hard liquor first. That's how I would get through it. So I'd be fine after because I'd have my heroin. But before I had my heroin, I resorted to, tequila, vodka, whatever I could get my hands on. I would always, as soon as I got a client, which that's just putting it in a nice way, that's what I called them, my clients. As soon as I got a client, I would plaster on the makeup, of course, because that's what you gotta do as a prostitute, especially when you're on drugs, because you're so pale and you look so sick that you gotta plaster it on anyway. Then you reach a point when you realize the guys don't really care anyways. But it's what you do as a prostitute, what's expected of you. Plaster on makeup, do at least 4 or 5 shots of liquor before the person arrived. And as soon as the guy arrived, I was already pretty much on my way to plastered and could get done what I had to get done. And of course, things just continued to escalate. I went from I honestly went from I think I'd start getting I'd get like 10 bags from him. So for those of you unfamiliar, a bag is the same as a point, which is basically, imagine like one Percocet, like little round pill crushed up into powder. That's the amount of a point, or a bag of heroin. And I was where like 1 point would last me all day. I'd just do like 1 point. Within a month, I was already to doing a whole bun in one day, which is 10 points. And then, before I knew it, I was in my regular habit of, just to stay out of withdrawal at the worst of it, at my worst point with the heroin, just to stay out of withdrawal, I was going through 2 grams every 2 days, a gram a day, basically, a gram a day, and it was costing me $300 every other day. So my drug habit cost me around $1,000 a week. The only way to support that habit is by prostituting. I got smarter in that sense, in that industry. I got smarter. I became colder. I became more calculated. My resentment and hatred for men that I already had became far more exacerbated. Like I said, when I came to Myrtle Beach, I felt worthless. And I had no respect or love or care for myself. And I was particularly affected by the man who I loved at the time that deceived me. It did have a lot to do with the psychological breakdown regarding that. I just didn't care anymore. I didn't care about saving it anymore. So, the first 7-8 months, I did not have intercourse with anyone. I still had a goal up there. I still had a block up. It was like, I will turn tricks from dusk until dawn, but I am not going to let you have sex with me. It's not going to happen. So basically everything that I had to do, was oral and otherwise. which is for the most part what a good majority of the men want anyways. Because when it comes to prostitution and when it comes to men and women in the industry, it's very different. Obviously, there's not a woman on the face of this planet that wants to be a prostitute. There's not a woman on the face of this planet that enjoys prostituting. It is a facade. It is an act. You know, we have to act like it's something that we like and want. That's just part of the game. That's part of the business. That's part of making the money. There's no woman on the face of this planet that can truly 100% separate love from sex or intimacy from sex. And therefore, it can't be something that they enjoy. With men, it's very different. It's almost like an exercise to them, you know. It's just, they can dissociate from that. I'm not saying that one's better than the other. I'm just saying that's the way that we're different. And I learned very quickly in the world of prostitution that men are all pretty much the same in that way. You know, it's like you see one, you see all. I learned way too much about how much the same men are when it comes to that, no matter what their background is, no matter how old they are, no matter, you know, what line of work they have, you know, whether they're married or single or believe in God or don't. When it comes down to that, when it comes down stooping down to that scum level of objectifying someone in that way, of the man using the woman's body and violating her and being fined for that to get his own fix, and then a woman to sell herself for money, it's I truly believe the world of prostitution is one of the closest places to hell on this earth. So, the next huge turning point in this cycle that I was in, which was just snowballing and getting worse all the time. Because the more you do, the more you're willing to do, the more desensitized you get. You're doing the drugs, you've got them, you know, you're getting enough drugs in your system, you're numb all the time, you're out of it all the time. And every once in a while when you start to come up out of it, or if you start to feel something, the dissociation became so severe, I just would not, it was like I was not in my body when it was happening. I would just be outside of myself, watching it happen, but at the same time kind of looking away and just waiting for it to be over. I just was not one with myself during, you know, these acts. I just dissociated. I don't know how to explain how it happens, because I've had dissociation since the time I was a baby and a toddler from the trauma and the violations and molestations and abuse, but it just became to a point where it was so severe and so almost all the time that even after the client would leave, even afterwards, I would still be dissociated from myself. I was not the same person. So I ended up using my middle name and then cutting it short too, because I didn't even want my real middle name out there. I kind of thought that I came up with that idea, but then I realized in retrospect that Alter, that was a demon, it had revealed itself as a demon of prostitution that went by Christine, and then I just happened to go by Christy on the streets. That was my, you know, whore name. And so, I don't know, connection, no connection, whatever, it doesn't really matter at this point. Like I said, I'm not going to get into how much I think was me or how much was affected or whatnot. Obviously, in my heart, deep down, who I was and what I wanted in my life had nothing to do with any of that. And if I could erase it and take it back, you know, I would have. I most certainly would have done a lot of things differently in my life. But that's life, you know, you can't rewind it. But God can bring good about from it. Absolutely, 100%, no matter how dark no matter how bad things get. And so I reached a point where things took another turn, and